Welcome to My Thailand Stories. Today we hear from a business owner from Edinburgh who thought he'd found the perfect way to start over after a painful divorce. A beautiful woman, a small resort in the mountains of Chiang Rai, and a chance at a new life. The price was unbelievably good because she needed to sell her family's property quickly. The lawyer verified everything. The contracts were signed at what looked like a government office. And then one morning, the real owners showed up. Here's his story. I'm Graham, I'm 55, and I was standing in the garden of what I thought was my resort when two Thai men got out of a pickup truck and told me I was trespassing on their property. I had the keys in my pocket. I had the contracts in my bag. I'd spent £140,000 10 days earlier buying this place. Except the man standing in front of me was holding the real title deed with his name on it. And Achara, the woman I'd fallen for, wasn't answering her phone. And the lawyer who'd verified everything had disappeared. Let me tell you how they did it. I spent 25 years building and running a construction supply business in Edinburgh, worked long hours, built strong relationships with contractors across Scotland, made a decent living. But in 2022, my marriage fell apart. My wife and I divorced after 28 years together. It was painful, expensive. It left me questioning what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. 28 years. More than half my adult life. Gone. After the divorce settlement, I was left with approximately £160,000. Not a fortune, but something. A chance to start fresh. I sold my share of the business to my partner and decided I needed to leave Scotland for a while. Clear my head. Figure out what came next. I'd always been interested in Southeast Asia. I'd visited Thailand twice before, once in the 90s and again in 2010. I'd loved it both times. The culture, the climate, the food, the relaxed pace of life. It all appealed to me in a way Edinburgh never had. In November 2023, I booked a one-way ticket to Bangkok. No fixed plans, no timeline, no idea what I was doing. I just wanted to travel, explore, see if I could imagine building a new life somewhere in Thailand. I spent 2 weeks in Bangkok, then headed north, visited Chiang Rai, spent a week there exploring the temples and night markets. Then continued further north to Chiang Rai. I'd heard that Chiang Rai was quieter than Chiang Mai, less developed, closer to the mountains and the Golden Triangle area. It sounded exactly like what I needed. I arrived in Chiang Rai in early December. The city was charming, smaller than Chiang Mai, more laid back, beautiful temples, surrounded by green hills that seemed to go on forever. I checked into a small guesthouse near the night market and started exploring. I walked around the city, visited the White Temple and the Blue Temple. Spent time at cafes just watching life go by. I felt more relaxed than I'd been in years. Maybe since before the marriage started falling apart. One afternoon, I was sitting at a cafe near the clock tower when a Thai woman sat down at the table next to mine. She was maybe late 40s. Beautiful. Well dressed in casual but expensive-looking clothes. She was reading a book in English. After a few minutes, she looked up and smiled at me. She said, "You're not from here." I laughed. Said no. Edinburgh. She said she could tell from my accent. Her English was excellent, barely an accent at all. She said she'd lived in London for a few years when she was younger, studied hospitality management. Her name was Achara. We started talking. Just casual conversation at first. She asked what brought me to Chiang Rai. I found myself opening up to her. I told her about my divorce, about selling my business, about wanting to do something different with my life. She listened carefully, nodding sympathetically. She said she understood what it was like to start over. She'd been through her own difficult divorce a few years ago. We talked for over an hour. She was easy to talk to, intelligent, funny. There was something about her that made me feel comfortable, like I could be honest without being judged. When she said she had to go, I asked if she'd like to meet for dinner. She smiled and said yes. We met that evening at a restaurant she recommended. Small place near the river with outdoor seating. We talked for hours. She told me about growing up in Chiang Rai, about her family, about her ex-husband who'd been controlling and difficult. She said after the divorce, she decided to focus on herself, travel, enjoy life, not rush into anything. I felt the same way, but sitting across from her, I also felt something I hadn't felt in years. A connection, an attraction, something real. Over the next 2 weeks, I saw Achara almost every day. We explored Chiang Rai together, visited temples, went to markets, ate at small restaurants. She showed me parts of the city tourists never saw. We laughed. We talked about everything. And slowly, it started to feel like more than friendship. One evening after dinner, she invited me back to her apartment. We sat on her balcony drinking wine, looking out at the mountains in the distance. She said she hadn't felt this comfortable with someone in a long time. I said the same. She leaned over and kissed me. It felt like starting over. Like maybe I could build something new here. Not just a life, but a life with someone. A few days later, Achara mentioned that her family owned a small resort about 20 minutes outside the city. She said it had been in the family for years, built by her late father as a retirement project. But after he passed away, the family couldn't manage it properly. Her brother lived in Bangkok. Her mother was too old to deal with the work. The resort had been sitting mostly empty for the past year. She said they'd been thinking about selling it, but it was hard to let go of something her father had built. She said, maybe I'd like to see it sometime, just out of curiosity. I said I'd love to. The next morning, Achara picked me up in her car, a silver Toyota. We drove about 20 minutes outside the city, heading toward the mountains. The scenery was beautiful. Rice fields, small villages, forested hills in the distance. We turned off the main road onto a smaller dirt track. Then we arrived at the property. My breath caught in my throat. It was stunning. A large plot of land, maybe 2 or 3 acres. Gardens, fruit trees, 6 wooden bungalows arranged in a semicircle. There was a main building that served as a reception area and restaurant. The bungalows were traditional northern Thai style, raised on stilts with wooden walls and tiled roofs. The entire property was surrounded by mountains and greenery. It looked like something from a travel magazine. Achara showed me around. The bungalows were simple but well maintained. Each one had a bedroom, a small bathroom, a veranda overlooking the gardens. The main building had a kitchen, a dining area with tables, a small office. She explained that the property had been operating as a guest house for about 5 years. But after her father died, the family had struggled to keep it running. She said they'd made the difficult decision to sell. She said the asking price was 6 million baht, about £140,000. I was shocked by how reasonable that seemed. In Scotland, £140,000 would barely buy you a 1-bedroom flat in a decent area of Edinburgh. Here, it was buying an entire functioning resort on a large piece of land with mountain views. I walked around the property, imagining what it'd be like to run it. I could renovate the bungalows, improve the gardens, add amenities, market it to travellers looking for a peaceful retreat. I could live on site in one of the bungalows and manage everything myself. And Achara would be nearby. We could build something together. Maybe not as business partners, but as partners in life. The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. This could be exactly what I was looking for. I asked Achara about the details. Who owned the property legally? What was the status? Could a foreigner own land in Thailand? Achara explained that foreigners couldn't directly own land in Thailand, but there were legal structures that allowed foreigners to control property. The most common method was to set up a Thai limited company. The foreigner would own 49%. Thai nationals would own 51%. The foreigner would control the company through shareholder agreements. The company would own the land. She said her family had already set up a company structure. The sale would involve transferring the company shares. She said it was simpler than buying the land directly. All the permits and licenses would transfer as well. She said her cousin was a lawyer. His name was Narong. He specialised in property transactions for foreigners. He could handle everything, make sure it was done properly and legally. I asked if I could think about it. Visit the property again? Achara said, of course. No pressure. She said she wanted me to be completely sure. She said this was a big decision, not just financially, but emotionally. She said if I bought the property, I'd be committing to staying in Thailand, committing to this life. She looked at me when she said it, like she was asking something deeper. I said I understood, and I wanted to think about it carefully. Over the next week, I visited the property 3 more times. Each time I noticed new details that made me love it more. The fruit trees heavy with mangoes and papayas, the vegetable garden, the small pond with fish, the way the morning mist settled in the valley. The place had character and potential. I also spent more time with Achara. Our relationship deepened. We talked about what it'd be like if I stayed, if I bought the property, if we built a life together. She never pushed, never pressured, but I could feel the possibility hanging in the air between us. After a week, I told Achara I wanted to buy the property. She seemed genuinely happy. almost emotional. She said she'd been hoping I'd say yes. She said she'd introduce me to Narong, her cousin, the lawyer. He'd handle everything. We met Narong the next day. He was in his late 40s, well-dressed, professional, spoke excellent English. He explained the legal process clearly. He said he'd conduct due diligence on the property, verify the title deed, check for any debts or liens, prepare the contracts. He said his fee would be 80,000 baht, about £1,900. That seemed reasonable for the work involved. I hired him on the spot. Over the next 3 weeks, Narong kept me updated on his progress. He sent messages every few days. He said he'd reviewed the land title deed and it appeared to be in order. He said the company that owned the property was properly registered. No outstanding debts. The business licenses were valid. Everything was checking out perfectly. In mid-January 2024, Narong called and said the due diligence was complete. He invited me to his office to review the findings. I went the next day. He had prepared a detailed report, written in both Thai and English. He went through it page by page. The land title was legitimate. The company structure was correct. No legal issues. He said based on his review, he saw no reason why I shouldn't proceed with the purchase. He said the property was a good investment. That was exactly what I needed to hear. Narong arranged a meeting at his office. Achara brought all the original documents, the land title deed, the company, registration certificate, the business licenses, financial records showing the guest house's income over the past 2 years. Everything looked professional and official. Stamps, signatures, letterheads. Narong reviewed the documents and confirmed they were legitimate. He prepared the sale agreement. The terms were straightforward. I'd pay 6 million baht to Achara's family. In return, they'd transfer the company shares to me. I'd become the controlling shareholder and owner of the property. The transfer would be completed at the land office in Chiang Rai once the payment was made. I signed the agreement, my hands steady, my mind clear. Achara signed as well. Narong witnessed the signatures. I was given a copy of the signed agreement. Now I needed to transfer the money. Achara provided the bank account details. Narong said once the payment was confirmed, we'd go to the land office together to complete the transfer. I went to a bank in Chiang Rai and arranged an international transfer from my UK bank account to the Thai account. The amount was £140,000, about 6 million baht. The bank processed the transfer. I was given a receipt. The transfer would take 2 to 3 business days. I felt excited and nervous. This was the biggest financial decision I'd made in years. But everything had been done properly. I'd hired a lawyer, conducted due diligence, met the seller in person, reviewed all the documents, and I had Achara. That mattered most. 3 days later, Achara confirmed that the payment had been received. She sent me a message thanking me, saying she was ready to complete the transfer process. Narong arranged for us to meet at the land office the following Monday. I spent the weekend with Achara. We stayed at the property, sleeping in one of the bungalows, waking up to mountain views, talking about our future. She said she was excited to see what I'd do with the place. She said maybe she could help, be involved. We could build something together. I said I'd like that. On Monday morning, I met Achara and Narong at what I thought was the land office in Chiang Rai. It was a government-looking building, busy with people processing property transactions. We took a number and waited. After about 30 minutes, we were called to a desk. Narong explained to the officer what we were there to do. He presented the signed sale agreement and the documents showing the company transfer. The officer reviewed the papers, asked Achara some questions in Thai. Achara responded calmly, confidently. The officer then asked me for my passport. I handed it over. She made copies and entered information into her computer. Then she asked Narong for additional documents. He provided them. Everything seemed to be progressing normally. The officer stamped several documents and handed them to Narong. She said something in Thai. Narong nodded and thanked her. We left the building. Narong explained that the transfer process had been initiated. It had taken another week for the final paperwork to be completed. He said this was normal for property transactions in Thailand. He said once the paperwork was finalised, I'd receive official confirmation that I was the new owner. Achara gave me the keys to the property. The weight of them in my hand felt significant. She kissed me, said she was proud of me, said this was the start of something beautiful. I believed her. Over the next week, I spent every day at the property, cleaning, organising, making small improvements. repainted one of the bungalows, fixed a broken step, trimmed the gardens. I contacted the local staff Achara had mentioned. They came by to introduce themselves, seemed friendly and willing to work. I started creating a marketing plan, list the property on booking websites, improve the online presence, reach out to tour companies. I had it all planned out. Achara came by most evenings. We'd have dinner together, talk about the future. She seemed happy. I was happy. Everything felt like it was falling into place perfectly. About 10 days after the land office visit, I was at the property at trimming bushes when a pickup truck pulled up. 2 Thai men got out, both in their 40s, dressed casually in work clothes. One of them approached me and said in broken English that he needed to talk to me. I asked what it was about, smiling. Assuming it was about booking rooms, he said something about the property. I invited them to sit down at one of the tables. The man who spoke some English introduced himself as Boonmi. He said he was the owner of the property. I laughed. I thought it was some kind of misunderstanding. I told him that couldn't be correct because I'd just purchased the property from Achara. Her family had owned it for years. He shook his head slowly. He said Achara didn't own the property. He did. He said his family had owned this land for 20 years. He'd built the resort with his own money, his own hands. He said he had no idea who Achara was, but she had no right to sell anything. I felt a wave of panic wash over me like cold water. I told him that couldn't be true. I'd seen the land title deed. I'd hired a lawyer who'd verified everything. I'd been to the land office. Boonmi pulled out a document from a folder he was carrying. He showed it to me. It was a land title deed, written in Thai with official-looking stamps. He pointed to his name on the document. He said this was the real title deed. It proved he was the owner. My hands started shaking. I called Narong immediately, explained what was happening, my voice tight. Narong said he'd come to the property right away. I told Boonmi that my lawyer was coming. We'd sort this out. There had to be some mistake. Boonmi seemed calm but firm. He said he wasn't trying to cause trouble, but he wanted to know why I was on his property and who'd told me I could be there. Narong arrived, about 40 minutes later. He spoke with Boonmi in Thai for several minutes. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I could see from Narong's face that something was very wrong. His expression changed. He looked pale. Finally, Narong turned to me and said we needed to talk privately. We walked away from Boonmi. Narong looked shaken. He said Boonmi was telling the truth. He was the real owner of the property. The land title deed I'd been shown was a fake. I felt like the ground was collapsing beneath me. I asked Narong how that was possible. He'd verified the title deed. He'd conducted due diligence. He'd confirmed everything was legitimate. Narong said he didn't understand. He said the documents he'd been given appeared to be genuine. He said someone must have created very convincing forgeries. He said he was sorry, but it appeared I'd been scammed. I could barely breathe. The garden around me seemed to spin. I asked him what I should do. He said the first step was to contact the police. He said I should also try to contact Achara immediately. I tried calling her. No answer. I sent messages, no responses. Narong said that wasn't a good sign. He said it was likely she'd planned this and had now disappeared. I felt sick, physically sick. Not just because of the money, but because of Achara, the woman I'd fallen for, the woman I'd imagined building a life with. Had any of it been real? Had she ever cared about me? Or was I just a target from the moment she sat down next to me at that cafe? Boonmi was still waiting at the table. Narong spoke with him again and explained the situation. Boonmi seemed sympathetic, but also frustrated. He said this wasn't the first time someone had tried to sell his property without his knowledge. He said scammers targeted rural properties because it was harder for owners to monitor them constantly. Boonmi said he lived about 30 minutes away, only came to the property once or twice a month to check on things. He'd stopped operating it as a guest house about a year ago. Too much work. The property had been sitting mostly empty since then. He said he had no idea how Achara and Narong had been able to show me around. They'd probably been watching it, waiting for him to leave. I asked Boonmi if there was any way we could work something out. I told him I'd paid £140,000 for the property. He looked shocked. He said he had no involvement in that transaction. He hadn't received any money. The money I paid had gone to criminals, not to him. He said he was sorry for my situation, but the property was his. I had no legal claim to it. He said I needed to leave and not come back. I felt devastated. I gathered my things, my hands still shaking, left the property with Narong. We went straight to the police station in Chiang Rai. I tried to explain what had happened. The language barrier made it difficult. Narong helped translate. The officer took down the information, said they'd investigate, asked for copies of all the documents I had. The sale agreement, the fake title deed, the bank transfer receipts. Everything. I provided copies. The officer said cases like this were complicated. He said it was clear I'd been the victim of fraud, but recovering the money would be very difficult. He said Ahara and her accomplices were likely using false identities. They'd probably already moved the money out of the country. He said they'd try to track them down, but he wasn't optimistic. He shrugged like he'd seen this 100 times before. He gave me a police report number, said I should keep it for my records. I asked about Narong. I said he was the lawyer who'd verified the documents. Why hadn't he caught the forgery? The officer said that was a good question. He asked Narong to show his credentials. Narong provided his lawyer license. The officer examined it, said something in Thai to Narong. Narong responded defensively. The officer turned to me, said Narong's license was legitimate, but it was possible he'd been negligent, or even complicit in the scam. He said I could file a complaint against Narong with the Thai Bar Association if I believed he'd acted improperly. I was too overwhelmed to process all of this. I left the police station feeling numb, went back to my guest house and sat on the bed, staring at the wall. I'd just lost £140,000. Nearly all of my savings. The money from my divorce settlement. The money that was supposed to give me a fresh start. It was gone, stolen by people I'd trusted, by a woman I'd fallen for. Over the next few days I tried everything I could think of. Went to the British Embassy. They were sympathetic but said there was little they could do. They said property scams targeting foreigners were common in Thailand. The legal system made it very difficult to recover losses. They gave me a list of lawyers who specialised in fraud cases, but warned me that pursuing legal action would be expensive. Could take years. No guarantee of success. I contacted one of the lawyers on the list. He reviewed my case, said it was clear I'd been scammed, but the chances of recovering the money were almost zero. He said the people who'd scammed me were likely part of an organised group. They used fake identities, fake documents. They created the illusion of legitimacy. By the time victims realised what had happened, the scammers disappeared. The money was gone forever. He said if I wanted to pursue the case, his fees would be at least £10,000 up front. No guarantee of success. I didn't have that kind of money anymore. I tried contacting Akara every day for 2 weeks. Her phone was disconnected. Her email address bounced back. She'd vanished completely. I went back to the cafe where I'd first met her. The staff didn't remember her. I went to the apartment where she'd said she lived. The landlord said no one by that name had ever rented there. I went to Narong's office. It was closed. A sign on the door said the office had been vacated. I asked the building manager where Narong had gone. He said Narong had left suddenly about a week ago. Hadn't paid his last month's rent. No forwarding address. It became clear that Narong had been part of the scam all along. He hadn't been an independent lawyer. He'd been working with Achara. The due diligence he'd conducted was fake. The documents he'd reviewed were forged. The land office visit had probably been staged with accomplices posing as government officials. Every part of the transaction had been carefully orchestrated, and I'd fallen for it completely. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was Achara. I'd fallen for her. I'd imagined a future with her. I'd let my loneliness and my desire for a fresh start make me vulnerable. And she'd used that against me. Every kiss, every conversation, every moment we'd spent together, it had all been part of the performance. I felt like the biggest fool in the world. I stayed in Chiang Rai for another week, but there was nothing more I could do. The police investigation was going nowhere. The British Embassy couldn't help. The lawyers said recovery was impossible. I'd lost everything, and there was no way to get it back. I booked a flight back to Edinburgh, returned home with almost nothing. A few £1,000s in my bank account. No property, no business, no fresh start, no Achara. Just debt, shame, and the crushing reality that I'd been completely deceived. The first few months back in Scotland were the darkest of my life. I had to move into a small rented flat. I had no job because I'd sold my share of the business. No savings. I was 55 years old, divorced, broke, starting over from nothing. I fell into a deep depression. Barely left my flat. Stopped answering calls from friends and family. I couldn't face telling them what had happened. Too ashamed. Eventually I had to find work. I took a job at a construction site. manual labour. It was humbling work for someone who'd once owned a business, but I had no choice. I needed income. It's been over a year now since the scam happened. I'm still working at the construction site. I've managed to save up about £8,000. Nowhere near what I lost, but it's something. I live simply now, no luxuries, no holidays, no dreams of owning property abroad. Just work, rent, food, trying to get by. £140,000. That's what it cost me to learn that the beautiful woman who kissed me under the stars and talked about building a future together was a professional con artist who'd done this before and would probably do it again. That's my story. I handed over my entire life savings to a woman I loved and a property that was never mine. I hope sharing this prevents someone else from doing the same. Thanks for sharing, Graham. The romance property scam is one of the cruelest cons in Thailand because it weaponizes loneliness and hope. Graham lost everything to a woman who knew exactly how to make a divorced man believe he'd finally found his way out. This is My Thailand Stories. Stay sharp out there.